So I want you to imagine just for a second that you traveled back in time to like 1965.
Okay.
And you tell someone there that you're about to, quote, crash out.
Right. They'd probably just, nod and hand you a pillow or something.
Exactly. They turn down the lights, tell you to get some rest. But if you fast forward and tell a teenager on TikTok today that you're going to crash out, they're probably going to take a few steps back and immediately pull out their phone to record you.
Yeah, it is a pretty stark contrast. I mean, how a phrase meant for falling asleep basically became a public threat.
It really is. And, well, that's exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're unpacking a single source article that traces the history of the phrase crash out.
Mm-hmm.
We want to take you on this 60-year linguistic journey to see how a really simple, almost totally mundane two-word phrase mutated across all these generations and subcultures to eventually mean its exact opposite.
And what's great about this is that, we tend to think of dictionaries as these static, boring rule books. But language is actually this live, breathing ecosystem. It adapts to the environment. So when you trace a phrase chronologically like this, you aren't just tracking vocabulary changes. You're actually tracking the psychological state of the people using the words.
Yeah, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So let's set the stage here and start at the baseline. Because to really understand what crash out means to a teenager today, we have to look at those literal roots from the 1960s to see how much it's changed.
Definitely.
Back then, to crash or crash out just meant falling asleep, usually after a really long taxing day. You were exhausted, maybe you had a few too many drinks, and you just hit the mattress.
Yeah, and people obviously still use it that way right now.
Oh, for sure. I'm exhausted, I'm going to go crash out.
Right. It's an incredibly physical, grounded image.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, to crash out was simply to succumb to your physical limits. There was no metaphor to it. Your body just demands rest, gravity takes over, and you sleep. It's a biological imperative.
I always kind of picture it like a dying battery. Like a system is suddenly losing power and just shuts down to protect itself.
That's a good way to look at it.
But then as we move into the 1970s and 80s, the phrase starts to drift a little bit. The drug culture of that era kind of adopts it.
Right, they come down.
Exactly. Crashing out becomes this specific terminology for coming down, as the effects of illicit substances begin to wear off.
And this is where we start to see the first real shift. Linguists often talk about this concept called semantic pejoration.
Semantic pejoration?
Yeah. It's a process where a word or a phrase takes on a much more negative, severe, or darker connotation over time.
So it's actively moving away from just resting your head peacefully.
Right. Because falling asleep after a hard day's work is a natural depletion of energy, right?
Yeah.
But coming down from illicit substances is an artificial depletion, and it's much, much more uncomfortable. To use your analogy, the battery isn't just naturally dying anymore.
The battery is, chemically failing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The end result is similar. The system shuts down, but the descent is suddenly much more unpleasant and jarring.
And what's wild is that it wasn't just the drug culture using it this way. Right around the same time in the 70s, the sports world grabbed hold of it too.
Oh, right, the tournament crashes.
Yeah. If a heavily favored team suffered a crushing or just an entirely unexpected defeat, the papers wouldn't just say they lost. They said they crashed out of the tournament.
Notice how the intensity just keeps dialing up here.
Yeah, it really does.
Because falling asleep is gentle. A chemical come down is physically jarring. But a crushing sports defeat, that is an abrupt, sudden halt to forward momentum. The phrase is taking on a much sharper, more aggressive edge.
Okay, but here is my problem with this timeline.
What's that?
I get the whole battery dying analogy for all three of those early eras. The 1960s exhaustion, the 70s drug come downs, the sports defeats. They are all fundamentally about a system powering down. But if I look at how the phrase is used today on the internet, it has absolutely nothing to do with exhaustion.
No, not at all.
If anything, it's this massive surge of hyperactive energy. So how on earth do we bridge that massive gap? How did a system powering down become so aggressive?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it seems like a total contradiction until you look past the physical energy of the phrase and you focus on the psychology behind it.
Okay.
The connective tissue across all these decades isn't actually a loss of energy. It's a loss of control.
A loss of control?
Yeah.
Okay, walk me through that, because I'm not totally seeing it.
Think about the 1960s definition first. When you are so exhausted that you quote-unquote crash out on the living room rug in your winter coat, you didn't decide to go to sleep.
Right.
Your biology made the decision for you. you lost control of your body.
Oh, I see.
And when someone is coming down from a substance in the 1970s, they can't stop the descent. They've lost control of their neurochemistry.
Wow.
And then, when that championship sports team suffers an unexpected defeat, they have literally lost control of the game.
So in all of these scenarios, you are basically a passenger to the crash.
Precisely. The phrase has always harbored this subtle, underlying tone of surrender. You are yielding to a force greater than yourself, whether that force is physical exhaustion, a chemical withdrawal, or just a superior opponent on the field.
That makes total sense. And that perfectly sets up the big generational pivot here.
Yeah, the Gen Z flip.
Right, because as we enter the 21st century, Generation Z gets their hands on the phrase, and they take this core DNA, this concept of losing control, but they completely flip the polarity.
They really do.
They take it from a passive event, something happening to you, and they turn it into something hyperactive.
It's a really fascinating linguistic inversion.
Yeah.
They kept the loss of control part, but they weaponized it.
Yeah, weaponized is the perfect word, because today, the modern slang meaning of crash out as a verb means to act wildly or recklessly or just in a totally distressed, unexpected manner. It implies someone is losing their temper and spinning angrily out of control. It's the literal opposite of a peaceful sleep. And if you look at Merriam-Webster today, they compared this modern usage to older expressions like freaking out or snapping.
Snapping is actually the perfect parallel for this.
Really? How so?
Well, a twig snaps because too much pressure is applied to it from the outside, right?
Right.
It's a sudden violent release of all this accumulated tension. And that aligns beautifully with how Gen Z repurposed crash out. It's a break under pressure.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me, just in terms of how we actually deploy this phrase in everyday life. We use it with so much irony now.
Oh, constantly.
The classic example the source gives is someone sitting at an airport boarding gate. They check their phone, they see a notification, and they turn to their friend and say, if this flight gets delayed again, I'm going to crash out.
Yeah, and they have absolutely zero intention of throwing a chair or spiraling out of control.
None. They are just mildly annoyed. But they use this explosive phrase.
Which brings us back to that central mystery you mentioned at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is our vocabulary adapting to this specific type of stress?
Yeah, why the hyperbole?
This raises an important question about how we use hyperbolic language as a modern coping mechanism. The world right now feels incredibly fast, complex, and largely out of our control.
Totally.
The friction of daily life is really high. So when a minor inconvenience happens, like a delayed flight claiming you were going to crash out, is a way of venting that internal pressure through humor.
So we are just like artificially raising the stakes of our annoyance to make it funny.
Exactly. It's an exhaust valve.
But I'm curious about the specific tipping point here. Like, how did we literally get from the passive sports defeat to the active airport meltdown? Because the source material gives us a specific origin point for this modern verb usage, doesn't it?
It does. We can trace the popularization of this hyperactive Gen Z version back to 2017.
Okay.
Specifically to a track by the rapper NBA Youngboy called Stepped On.
Right. And the specific lyric in that track is, quote, crash out if I'm nervous.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta be honest, I've always struggled with this specific connection.
Why is that?
Because when people are nervous, they usually shrink, right? They freeze up, they get quiet, they don't explode. So how does nervousness equal crashing out?
Well, that is exactly why it's such an important lyric for this whole timeline.
Yeah.
Think about it. Nervousness is an internal state. It's this internal buildup of anxious energy.
Right.
Fundamentally, being nervous is the internal sensation that you are losing control of your environment. You don't know what's going to happen next.
Okay, I'm with you.
So NBA Youngboy bridged the gap. He took the historical concept of inevitably losing control, and he applied it to a conscious, outward behavioral reaction. The internal feeling of losing control, the nervousness, leads directly to the external wild reaction, the crashing out.
Oh, wow. I see. So if I'm feeling that intense internal pressure, I'm not going to just fall asleep or quietly suffer in the corner. I am going to externally manifest the chaos I feel inside. I'm going to act recklessly.
Exactly. Going back to your earlier analogy, the battery isn't just dying anymore. The battery is overheating and exploding.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. Exploding battery. But, you know, the evolution doesn't stop in 2017.
Not at all.
Because now that we've seen the verb itself shift from passive sleep to active recklessness, we have to look at what the internet did to it next.
Right, because the internet doesn't just share language. It acts like this massive evolutionary pressure cooker. What used to take isolated populations centuries to mutate now happens in a digital petri dish in a matter of, like, weeks.
Which brings us to the early 2020s. Because crash out didn't just stay a verb, it mutated grammatically.
Yes, it did.
It morphed into a single word noun, a crash out. All one word. It went from an action you do to an identity you are.
Yeah, and linguists actually have a term for this. They call it functional shift or zero derivation.
Zero derivation.
Yeah. It's when a word functioning as one part of speech is just forced to become another part of speech without adding any suffixes or changing its form at all.
Oh, like how we took the noun Google and just started using it as a verb, like I'll Google it.
That's the perfect example. But here we did it in reverse. We took the verb to crash out and made it a noun. The modern definition of a crash out is an argumentative, highly unpredictable person who actively goes out of their way to look for fights.
Which is wild.
Think about the intentionality there, though. A verb describes a temporary state. As you pointed out earlier, anyone can say they're going to crash out if their flight is delayed.
Right, it's just a moment of weakness.
Exactly. But a noun describes a permanent archetype. A crash out isn't someone just having a bad day. It's someone whose entire persona is built around combative, unpredictable behavior.
They don't just lose control, they actively seek the loss of control.
Precisely.
But I have to ask, like, is this actually a new identity or is it just more internet hyperbole? Like, is a crash out a real character archetype in society now, or is it just a meme?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is absolutely a real sociological archetype now. And to understand why, we have to look at where this noun form originated.
Okay.
This specific grammatical shift emerged first in African American Vernacular English, or AAVE, particularly in the southern United States.
And AAVE has historically been the birthplace of, a massive amount of modern global slang.
It really has, and there's a deep sociolinguistic reason for that. Marginalized dialects often function as in-group signifiers, right?
Right.
They rely on linguistic innovation to build solidarity and communicate complex realities in these highly evocative ways. And because the language is so descriptive and culturally rich, the dominant culture inevitably observes it, recognizes its utility or its perceived coolness, and then appropriates it into the mainstream.
It just gets completely scooped up.
Exactly. But what accelerated that process so rapidly for the word crash out was the environment it was placed in. Social media platforms, specifically TikTok, took this regional, highly descriptive noun and just forced it into the global algorithm.
Well, and that makes sense because TikTok is a purely visual medium.
Right. You aren't just reading text on TikTok. You are watching videos of people.
Millions of videos.
Yeah. And people started posting all these videos of individuals acting completely wild in public. You know, someone losing their temper at a drive-through window.
Oh, yeah, or acting completely unhinged in traffic.
Or throwing a massive tantrum in a retail store. The algorithm heavily rewards these high-conflict, spectacular public meltdowns.
So what does this all mean for the speed of language? Because when you have millions of people suddenly watching these chaotic public meltdowns every single day, the audience collectively needs a label for the people starring in them.
Exactly. A verb just wasn't sufficient anymore. You don't want to just describe what the person is doing in the video. You want to categorize them as a specific type of human being.
And AAVE provided the perfect, hyper-efficient linguistic tool with the noun crash out.
It's like the internet demanded a new character class, and the language just adapted to fill the void.
Oh, that guy screaming at the barista. Don't worry about him. He's just a total crash out.
Right. It takes the entire 60-year history of the phrase loss of control, the recklessness, the visual spectacle, and packages it into one punchy two-syllable noun.
That is just incredible. And because of the viral nature of the algorithm, a highly localized piece of southern U.S. AAVE becomes this mainstream global terminology almost overnight.
It really does.
It really makes you think about the sheer speed of human communication today. Because if you look at the timeline we just mapped out, it took roughly 50 years from the 1960s to 2017 for the phrase to slowly drift from falling asleep to that NBA YoungBoy rap lyric about nervousness.
50 years for a fairly subtle shift in how the verb was applied.
Right. But then it only took about 3 or 4 years from 2017 to the early 2020s for social media to completely reinvent it as a grammatical noun and broadcast it to the entire planet.
The technology fundamentally changed the speed limit of language. Because words are essentially just empty vessels. We pour our cultural anxieties, our technological pace, and our collective stress into them. Right now, society is highly stressed, It's highly visual, and it's highly reactive.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
So a word meant for sleeping was slowly hollowed out and refilled with anxiety and spectacle until it literally became a label for a public meltdown.
It really is a mirror of the era that's holding it.
Which is why tracing these slang terms isn't just, fun linguistic trivia. It is real-time sociology.
So to wrap this incredible journey up for you listening at home, let's just look at the full picture here.
Let's do it.
In just a few decades, a simple phrase meant for resting your heavy head on a pillow after a long day of work, well, it evolved to describe a devastating sports loss in the 70s.
Yep.
Then it shifted into a hip-hop lyric about the internal pressure of anxiety. And then it zero-derived into a TikTok noun used to describe an unpredictable person actively looking for a fight in public.
The biggest takeaway here is that you, the listener, are an active participant in this ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Language isn't handed down to us from dictionaries. It is built, it's broken, and it's rebuilt in our group chats, in song lyrics, and in the comment sections of the videos we watch.
Yeah.
Every single time you use a piece of slang, even if you're just using it ironically about your delayed flight, you are participating in a live, moving history of human communication.
You are pushing the evolution forward. Whether you realize it or not, you are the digital petri dish.
Well said.
So we want to leave you with a final thought to chew on today. We've just tracked how crash out completely inverted its meaning to match the stress levels of the modern world. It went from falling asleep to picking a fight. So looking at your own life and the conversations you had today, ask yourself, what totally mundane, everyday word that you casually used this morning is going to mean the exact opposite 50 years from now?